Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Thank you to everybody who's turned up and to councillors as well. I believe we have one person missing, so we'll come to apologies in a moment just in case. I'm Councillor Tony Dyer. I'm the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Councillor Mark Bradshaw is the Vice Chair. On my left is Stephen Peacock, the Chief Executive of Bristol City Council, and on my right is Lucy Fleming, who will be keeping us all in check, make sure we don't get too carried away. I'll allow other councillors to introduce themselves as and when we come to questions. First, safety is, I think everybody here is aware of the safety situation, but I'll repeat it anyway, just in case. We're not expecting any fire alarm. If the fire alarm does go off, then can I ask you to leave smartly but quietly through the main doors, go down the ramp towards Bristol Cathedral, and then congregate outside Bristol Cathedral. So, moving on to agenda item 2, which is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Everyone's here now, Chair.
Thank you. No apologies. Agenda item number 3, declaration of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest from councillors? No. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, minutes of previous meetings. Lucy?
Chair, on declarations, I should probably disclose prior to the discussion that until I became acting Lord Mayor for a short period, I was a non-exec director for Bristol Waste.
Thank you, Steve. Lucy, minutes.
Yes, members. 2 sets of minutes for you to approve from the meetings on the 4th of December and the 18th of January. Apologies that the December set was late.
Do we have any corrections or observations for the minutes?
Yeah, when we get the follow-ups to the questions that we've asked, particularly around the CAS.
I'll chase it up. I know some responses have been provided, haven't they? And I'll check which ones are outstanding. Just leave it with me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. The one I've asked hasn't been answered.
Okay, so without proviso, can I take the minutes as agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is Chair's business. I've got 2 items of Chair's business. Item number 1 is to warn everybody, particularly councillors, I have sinusitis, which is making me very irritable and very miserable. So when we do questions and comments, can we please keep them as short and sweet as possible and as relevant as possible to the topic at hand, because my sinusitis will not be friendly. The second item of Chair's business is to note that this is the last public meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, unless something comes up that we need to convene. But this is the last planned public meeting. That will not be the last time that myself and the other Osram councillors will be meeting, because we do have a business planning workshop and also another workshop later in the next couple of months. As this is the last public Osram for at least 10 years, because we're moving into the committee model system, I would just like to express my thanks to all the councillors you are on Osram now and have been on Osram at any point in the past. As somebody who hadn't intended to be the chair of Osram when I got elected, I have been very grateful for the help and support I have received from all of you. And I'd also like to thank officers, cabinet members, and other representatives for their help and support. And in particular, I'd like to thank Lucy and her team for the outstanding work they do behind the scenes to make sure this goes as smoothly as possible. Item number 6 is public forum, and we only have one item of public forum, which is from David Wedgwell. David, are you ready to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. So I speak today really with concern on behalf of bus passengers and public transport users about the debacle that's going on at Temple Meads railway station over the Grosvenor Hotel. I understand Royal Cloud were asked by the City Council to demolish the hotel after a fire that was unsafe, even though the front was local listed. The demolition started with bulldozers, I believe, provided by Bristol City Council, or maybe the contractor can clear it in a minute. But nevertheless, it appears to have stopped halfway through the process. We have a series of bus interchange bus stops at that location for buses coming in from the City region and Somerset. And it's a major interchange for the region's major railway station at Bristol Temple Meads for trains going to the north of England, Scotland, London and the rest of the southwest and to Wales. So we were pleased when it was announced by Bristol Mayor Marvin Rees that it was actually going to be demolished and the bus interchange reopened, the cycleway reopened and the area made safe and the land transferred to Rail Pen, which is the Rail Pension Funds, along with the Georgian Railway Hotel, which is listed and not being demolished, which is going to be restored. However, the scheme has now stopped. There's no contractors on site. Bits of the building and rubble are falling down onto the bus stops below, which are still closed, of course, for safety reasons. And the thing is a mess. And I believe also at the last Cabinet WECA, Bristol asked WECA to fund the Victoria Street City Centre, Temple Meads, bus lanes, improvements on that corridor, which went through and will go to the WECA board for approval with the Mayor, Metro Mayor. So what I'm asking today is for the council to take urgent action, serve notice, get demolition underway as Network Rail said could be possible on safety grounds, and clear that site. That's what people in Bristol want, that's what your taxpayers want, and that's what public transport users want across the sub-region that use the railway station and bus interchange. So my quest today is for action, please, and for Mayor Norris and Mayor Rees and Don Alexander to take some urgent action with the Chief Executive and serve notice and put bulldozers on the site and clear the site for safety and reopen the facilities for the travelling public, including the cycleway and walkway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to allow Stephen to respond.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Dave, just to be absolutely clear, the building and the work in question is a responsibility of the building owner. The contractors don't work for Bristol City Council. They work for the building owner. So building enforcement colleagues from the council did go down there last week. The contractor has confirmed to them, albeit they are working for the building owner, not for us, that the work is scheduled to be continuing. There are certain things that the building owner is required to do, and that includes making it safe, including the highway and the cycle path and the walking paths around it. So it needs to be finished. As we understand it, it will be done, and it will be done by the end of March. But it's the building owner's responsibility, and the powers you might be referring to, things like CPO or other, to do enforcement to do with unsafe buildings. The fact is, we've made the area safe. We had to close a path to do that, as obviously that's unsatisfactory. Working very hard to get the building owner to take their lawful responsibilities seriously, and there is progress. It went quiet. We're not expecting it to stay quiet. The contractor who works for the building owner does tell us that it intends to carry on and finish the job.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. David, I think your request is that for us to raise this issue with the Mayor of Bristol City Council, the Mayor of the West of England Combined Authority, Councillor Don Alexander is here already, and as is Stephen, I'm happy to pass that request on and raise it.
We just like the passenger facilities back. It is a major bus interchange. It costs £500,000 to build, and it is the major stops, and buses are being put down temporarily in that area on temporary stops.
All right. Okay. All right, David, you've made your statement, and we'll raise it with the relevant people. Christine.
Can I follow up with that? So it's what Stephen Peacock's just said. Am I right in understanding then that because it's private, there are legal requirements that owner has? If they're breaking those legal requirements, who or what brings that challenge if it's not the council?
So we can provide you with a fuller update, but it has been through a process to get to a point where the building owner did agree, after several conversations which were escalated to take the action they're now taking. We're not expecting it to have been stopped. I'm still expecting it to be finished. And the finishing of that job means bringing it back to full use so that we can reopen the walkway and all of the highway and the transport interchange. They're under a legal duty to do that. And if they don't comply with that legal duty, we'll take appropriate escalation action.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the public statement, David. Now I'm going to move on to agenda item number 7, which is the work programme. Lucy, is there any comment you want to make about that?
Well, Chair, just as you've already said, this is the final OSM meeting, so I think there are a couple of other scrutiny activities still to take place, but in the main, you will now be looking towards handing over your recommendations to the new cohort of councillors, and the only other thing to say is that you are planning to submit your annual report to full council in May this year, because it will be a sort of outgoing handover, won't it, rather than the other way around.
Yes, that's the plan. And also, in terms of the business planning workshop, the recommendations from that will go to the policy committees following the election, because they will need to decide what their priorities are within the corporate strategy and how to measure those. Move on to agenda, unless there are any comments on that. Okay, agenda item number 8 is the forward plan. The latest forward plan was published on the 5th of February. Jeff would not forgive me if I didn't mention it does not show any dates or any reports beyond the SIPs and Marks cabinet. Jeff, do you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to do my impression of a stuck record. But I don't know whether the Mayor was trying to set a record by having the most number of items added to a forward plan at short notice, but certainly I think it was something in the region of 20 new items added, all to be discussed at the March Cabinet meeting. So that is not best practice. That is not the way things should be done. That is a misuse of the forward plan. And I've repeatedly said that we need a forward plan that looks forward at least 12 months, not that looks forward 30 days. So I just want to put that on record, but repeat what we said at our previous meeting. And Stephen knows this view, that for the committee system to stand the slightest chance of working, there has to be a proper forward plan in place and released to committee chairs as soon as they are nominated, and ideally as soon as they're elected, because without that we stand very little chance of the authority running itself in the way that it needs to make decisions in a timely and informed way.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. And I think this is something about the forward plan that we have been raising time and time again. I do believe there are going to be processes included in the committee model to try and ensure that we do get a forward plan that is much forward looking. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 9, which is the minutes of the West of England Combined Authority meeting. These are usually just for noting, but I don't know if any of the members of OSM sit on either the audit or the scrutiny committee had any comments to make. Jeff?
Just one point, I think, can we make a point to establish where these minutes will go in future? And as chair of the Combined Authority Audit Committee, can I suggest that wherever they go, the Audit Committee minutes also go, because they raise a significant number of compliance points where WECA has not been performing very well. And I think it's important that the relevant committee has sight of those minutes and is aware of the issues.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, just on that, I have started conversations about, bringing WECA audit committee minutes to bodies within this council, so that's something I'm keen to take forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to agenda item number 10, which is the Q3 23-24 corporate risk report. I've forgotten who's going to be presenting this. Okay, my mistake. I hadn't realised that this report is just for noting. If there are any comments that anybody...
Thanks. I did just have one question. It may be that no one here can answer it. It may have to be taken away. But I noticed there was one risk item in there that's proposed to be escalated into the strategic risk register, which is about highways, assets and maintenance backlog. I noted that there were other risks in there that are not being escalated, that are staying within directorates around harbour assets and park assets that on the rating looked very similar. So I just wondered why the highways one in particular is being escalated when the others remain within the directorates. And sort of connected to it, we've seen the announcement last week about pothole repairs starting to come through now for the end of March, which is really good news. Those were all things that were held up in the logjam around, caused by all the issues with the framework contract and contractors not being able to meet the prices that are in there. Does this announcement mean that that logjam is now starting to be worked through and released, and can we expect to see other schemes in that backlog now starting to come through?
Thanks, Steve. I think we'll probably have to take that out of the way and get a response for you. Unless you want to say something.
Well, obviously the one that's coming up to the corporate risk register is because of the rating of 21 and high, which would then bring it onto the corporate risk register and escalate it up from the directorate level report. So that's why the highways infrastructure one has come up to 21. Why it's been rebadged at 21 is a question I'd probably defer to highways officers to answer.
Yeah, it's fair enough. The harbour one and the parks one were also rated the same, so I wasn't sure why they were staying down and that one was, if there's something different there, but...
All right, thanks, Steve. Councillor Brown. Andrew.
Just to note as well that the highest risk is CRR 55, children placed in unregistered profession may be at risk. That is a risk that members of the Audit Committee are concerned about and are going to be looking at in more detail at our next meeting.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Follow up with that. Is to ask whether the council children's homes that are currently underway in Lockleys they're going to support this, but will they reduce it to a level that we can no longer have unlawful practice?
Stephen.
It's obviously very closely linked to that objective. The situation where we, as you know, quite often always seems to be on a Friday, are faced with no choice but to comply with our legal duties, is made worse if there is just this inherent lack of local capacity. That question about how much is enough, is one that is quite challenging to answer. Our understanding of demand is not perfect, and there's a cost to be paid for putting too much local provision in that doesn't get utilised. So yes is a simple answer, but whether we'll be able to eliminate it, obviously there'll always be that unknown. But we've had somewhere between 4 and 6 at any one time recently, and that is far too many. I mean, 1 is too many. So we're trying to get to 0. How much more capacity we need to build to guarantee it was always 0, in other words, it was always a place, it's a different matter, but definitely important. And it's not just lawfully the right thing to do. It's better for the child, obviously, and it's financially better for us. So it's why it's such a key priority for us right now to increase sufficiency in the city.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Okay, we're now going to move on to agenda item number 11, which is the Bristol Holdings business plans. And we're going to start with the Bristol Holding Limited business plan, and I'm going to hand over to Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. So my name is Chris Smith. I'm the interim executive lead for Bristol Holding. So Bristol Holding continues to provide an assurance role for the council's companies. So as such, we attend all of the company's board meetings. So that's monthly for Bristol Waste and every other month for Gorham Homes. So we act as an independent observer at those meetings and challenge where necessary. In addition, Bristol Holdings hosts the quarterly company's assurance meeting in conjunction with a shareholder liaison team, where we review the company's performance against business plans and against their KPI targets. The follow-up actions are tracked and agreed, along with actions minuted. Bristol Holding also attends and contributes to the quarterly shareholder meeting, in which the Chief Executive and the Section 151 officer attends, as well as Councillor Cheney. Bristol Holding also attends the audit and risk committees for the individual companies, which, as you know, have been established in the last year and a half. We, at those meetings, review all their financial policies, their procedures, governance, risks. Another key part of Bristol Holdings' function is to challenge and review the company strategies and their business plans. So Bristol Holding works also very closely with the external auditors, which are PwC in the instance of the council companies. So we agree a process and agree the year-end timetable. We also manage the relationship with the tax advisors to ensure that tax planning is done appropriately and that any tax is managed on behalf of the companies to reduce that level of tax. Now, you will see, councils, you will see in the paper circulated the Bristol Holdings business plan. It's main point to note, it's a one-year business plan. It covers the next 12 months to the financial year end, March 25. The plan is only for 12 months at this stage because it's, that's why the council can consider the role of Bristol Holding in future and beyond the March 2025 period. The intention also is to have an independent review of governance and the role of Bristol Holding later this year in the council companies. In summary, the structure of Bristol Holding is very lean, and that organisation consists of myself, a part-time chair, and a part-time administrator. The whole idea is it is flexible. It's an agile team so that we can respond to any urgent demands by flexing resources upwards if we need to. So, for example, what do we mean? If there's an additional company at some point in the future that's added or a joint venture, that we can actually flex our resources. The other key point to note from the business plan is that costs are kept to a minimum. So when you look at the costs of Bristol Holding 3 years ago, they're some 45% lower now than they were then. I'm not going to talk through in any detail the rest of the plan because you've got the paper. So I just wanted now just to open up for any questions, if anybody's got any questions about the plan.
Thanks, Chris. Just a quick question for myself. This might just be some background just to help with the questions coming up, is obviously we have Gorham Homes and we have Bristol Waste. Obviously there's also the joint venture versus City Leap. Obviously there's a different relationship with Gorham and with Bristol Waste and there is with City Leap. Can you explain how that works within...
Yeah, sure, within the Holdings setup. So Holdings is very active and is responsible for Gorham Homes and Bristol Waste, but it doesn't have an active role within City Leap, which has its own governance structure. That's the most important point to note. It has its own structure. So at this stage, we're not involved. As I said to you earlier, that potentially we've got resources, if needed, to provide support or lend support at a future date.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bradshaw.
Thanks, Chair. As someone who's had involvement with Holding in the past, I'm pleased that they continue to have an assurance role, although it's very much pared down given circumstances. However the shareholding is vested after May, I'd like to think that Holdco has a role maybe in helping some of the newer members and the council at that point understand how best to ensure there's democratic oversight of the various boards. Is that something that Holdco in principle could take on?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bradshaw. Absolutely it is, as I mentioned, around the flex available, but it's something that can be visited post the election. Certainly that the ability and the resources are there if needed. So I would see that as a good route. Thank you.
Stephen, I think you want to add something as well.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Obviously, I think you're absolutely right. There have been discussions going back a year or two about whether a leaner model could be sufficient. You've heard reference to the audit and risk committees of the two companies. Their maturity is something that we're looking at very closely. But this close to a change, it also felt that it was perhaps useful to have the extra assurance for precisely that reason. So I still think a lot of us would say there is a point in time where it may be possible to dispense with BHL as it currently exists, because there is a cost to having it. You can see the numbers in the plan, but it's not for now. And just to pick up on one point, the practical consequence of the move to committee system is that the chief executive becomes the shareholder. So that's already been set out. But in practical terms too, it doesn't really make a huge difference. So we would expect whichever the chair of the relevant committee would play a great interest in how we manage our companies. But it would actually be the chief exec that would have the shareholding responsibility.
And just to emphasise that's because under the committee model, no single councillor can be given a decision-making power. It's the committees that are given the power. Jeff.
Thank you, Tony. Nothing personal, Chris, but if I look at this and I see 300k cost of holdings, I first of all think, is that what I was expecting to see on the basis of what we looked at last year? And I certainly thought we were going for something slimmer. But I understand all the points that Mark's made about the importance of holdings and the role it does. And I recognise that actually those costs really are investor costs, and it's there to give the investor protection and insurance. So I can see that all the logic in that. The bit that then confuses me is that what effectively has happened is 300k of costs that should have fallen to the city council are borne by the holding company and then charged to two subsidiaries that don't make enough profit to cover the costs. And I look at that and I think, hang on, this is actually quite a daft world. And then when you tell me that we're paying for tax advice, now I'm a great favour of you buying advice from firms of chartered accountants. I'm very happy with that. But I'm not sure how much advice you need when you have two companies that are both making a loss or have accumulated losses brought forwards. So I do look and question, we are paying large chunks of money here for that advice. So what we're paying for staff, I understand, because whether it's in holdings or whether it's in the city council, we desperately need that assurance. So I'm not questioning that, but I do just wonder about the bits of advice that we're buying in, because the audit of holdings should be very straightforward because there's very little cost to it, and that tax advice should perhaps be being bought by the individual subsidiaries when they need it and not borne by holdings. So I would just be questioning the rationale and whether there isn't too much in that package for what we need.
Yes, thank you. A really good question, Councillor Gopp. If you look at the costs and the cost base, a significant portion, almost a third of the cost, relates to external audit fees, and there is a fraction, there is a little bit related to tax advice, but that tax advice at the moment is predominantly related to tax compliance. But to your point, essentially, it's a really good point. With the 300k's worth of costs, you've got circa 85 plus associated with the external audit fees, which would be a cost incurred in any case. So you have that's it's sort of a sunk cost that comes with the council businesses. And you've also got some other costs there that would be incurred in any case, but I accept your point around staff costs.
So Tony, I'm just following up on that. If one was looking at this logically, if the role of the staff is to do what the council needs staff to do, and the cost of the auditors is to do something that has to be done because we've created a holding company, then I can't see a reason why we don't directly own the shares in the trading companies and employ the officers of the holding company to do their role, and we cut out the need for external auditor. That seems to me like a very significant expense, and it just doesn't seem appropriate, doesn't seem value for money to me.
Yes. A good point. You'd still, of course, have the limited company costs for the audit of Gorham Homes plus Bristol Waste in any case, except what you're saying about Bristol Waste as a Bristol Holding. I suppose the other point to note is there would be some of that role that Bristol Holding carries out, some of the people costs, that would have to be absorbed within the council's costs. But nevertheless, I accept some of the points you make.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I guess the so we have looked, as you'll remember, Jeff, from when you were on the shareholder group, at winding down Bristol Holding ever since the kind of ending of Bristol Energy, or the selling of Bristol Energy, because ultimately we've got a whole company with just the waste company and Gorham sitting under it, and that's not a huge amount of effort. However, the kind of assurance that the company provides has been useful to me and to senior officers within the council, that assurance is independent and not provided by council officers, following the chief exec or political leadership. So whilst it is a cost, I think it's probably worth paying for. Why we attribute it to the companies, I guess that's just because that's how Holdco has always been funded. We could move it around. In the end, it's all wooden dollars, as council money moving around to somewhere or another.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick point of clarification, because I don't have a background in this that people like Mark and Jeff do. The report refers throughout to Bristol Holding, but then in some places it refers to Holdco instead. Am I right in thinking that's just a shorthand for whatever future state might exist this time next year?
It is. Holdco is really just a short form for holding company. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, do I have any more questions from councillors? Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Chris. I'm now going to pass on to Gorham Homes. Would you like to introduce yourself, Andrew?
Right, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Andrew Barton-Johns. I'm a board member of Gorham Homes and also chair of the Audit and Risk Committee.
Thank you. Please carry on with the other presentation.
I think we have some slides, so I don't know if we can have those up.
Bear with us. There they are.
All right, that's good. Thank you very much. So, as I said, I'm a member of the Gorham Homes Board, and I'm currently chair of our Audit and Risk Committee. I'm delighted to be here today to present our business plan for the 2024-25 year. I'm joined by our Managing Director, Stephen Baker, our Chief Financial Officer, Chris Arnold, and our Development Director, Christiana Makaru, at the end. We'll be taking you through a set of slides that summarise the business plan, and we'll be very happy to take questions at the end. Could I have the next slide, please? So just by way of introduction, the need to build new homes with the high levels of affordable housing does remain a priority, not only for Bristol, but it's also a national priority. And that's why I'm proud and privileged to be part of the Gorham Home Board and in a team that's finding innovative ways to keep building for Bristol. I believe Gorham Homes is very well placed to respond to the housing challenges our city faces, and this business plan shows our strategy for doing that, and that includes building around half our homes for council housing and shared ownership, prioritising council housing across our sites so they're ready to move into first, investing in training to those who need it most through our Skills Academy, and establishing a sustainable funding model through our partnerships with national home builders. So the plan highlights where we're building and plan to build, and includes the largest development in a generation at Hengrove Park. and that amounts to 1,400 homes, of which 700 are council housing and shared ownership homes. Steve.
Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the most important parts of our business plan is our objectives. Just a reminder, these are the things that the council asks us to do each year. So I'd like to note that these remain the same as they were in the last business plan, and I'll go through them very briefly, in turn highlighting our targets and how we will achieve them, and any risk management we will do as part of delivering those objectives. So our objectives are to move at pace to increase the supply of new homes built each year across Bristol, including high levels of affordable housing. Number 2 is that we will build sustainable homes that have a net positive effect on the environment and increase biodiversity. Number 3 is we will build homes and spaces that create inclusive communities where people can thrive. And number 4 is to provide a commercial return to our shareholder and to meet the highest standards of social and environmental accountability. So they're the objectives that underpin the entire business plan, and I hope that that's been clear in your reading of the business plan, that that's the theme that we followed. Next slide, please. So we're going to take the objectives in turn now. So we'll start off with objective number 1. So objective number 1 is building at pace. We have a pipeline of around 3,000 homes, half to be council housing and shared ownership, which is part rent, part buy. In 2024-2025, around 660 homes will be on site, which is great progress from what has been a start-up business in recent years. Projects already started will account to 268 homes at One Lockleys, and we have 53 homes started at Hengrove Park. That's delivering council housing as the first phase. We've made great progress this year, completing our first homes at One Lockleys, which you can see in the photograph, in December. And in the 2024-2025 financial year, we'll complete around 147 new homes. I'll now hand over to Christiana, who will talk you through the development sites for the next year.
This map shows where we're building, and it highlights the sites we aim to submit a planning application for in the 2024-2025 financial year. We'll continue to see more homes completed, and this year we'll welcome residents into their new homes at One Lockleys. We'll continue building 53 council homes at Hengrove Park bookends and aim to start at phase 1 of the Hengrove Park master plan, and that's 209 homes, the energy centre and a large portion of the park. We will also start building at Dovercourt Road in Lockleys and New Fossway Road in Hengrove, and subject to planning consent, we hope to be building at Baltic Wharf too. We've chosen 3 sites to prioritise for a planning submission. That's the Grove Car Park, St Ursula's in Henleys, and the Brownfield site at Novers Hill, for which we held a design competition with the community last year. We'll continue to work on our pipeline and bring forward our other sites when appropriate too. Next slide, please. Our targets for the 2024-25 financial year show how we're prioritizing affordable homes, with just over 100 completed by March 31st, 2025. This is prudent in a year where the housing market may remain subdued, and of course means we're able to support the council's need for more council-owned homes, ensuring these homes are ready to move into first across our sites. We know this is essential, with high numbers of people on the housing waiting list and 1,500 in temporary accommodation. Next slide, please. Our cumulative completions show a total of more than 1,150 homes completing over the next 5 years. We need a steady flow of sites coming through the Gorham Homes pipeline, and we will be adding more of our pipeline sites into our business plan numbers as they progress.
Next slide, please. So this is our risk management side for objective number 1. We operate in a commercial market and work in partnership with home builders to prioritise commercial return. We'll manage market risk with national commercial intelligence and procurement gains through these partners. Our plans are highly dependent on timely progressing through the planning system, and we've based our 2024-2025 business plan forecasts on statutory planning timelines, and will continue to support Bristol City Council in meeting these targets. So that's the end of Objective 1, but hand over to Christiana to take you through Objective number 2.
Objective 2 focuses on how we build sustainable homes that have a net positive effect on the environment and increase biodiversity. The climate and ecological emergencies demand urgent action and leadership from across the construction industry. We're meeting this challenge head-on, exceeding industry standards to create places that benefit people and the environment around us. Next slide, please. We've set some high targets here that go over and above industry standards. Homes that we will submit for planning permission in 2024-2025 will achieve net carbon zero, an EPC rating of A biodiversity net gain over and above local and national policy, which is 10%, building with nature standards, RIBA 2030 climate challenge targets, which is a roadmap to help us get to net zero.
Thank you. The risk management section on Objective number 2. This level of sustainability is hugely important to us, so we only select partners that can meet these high standards. This requirement is entrenched in our legal agreements we form with these partners, and we monitor progress regularly to ensure our homes are built to the high environmental standards that we set. It's nice to see the Energy Centre again.
Objective 3 highlights our aim to build homes and spaces that create inclusive communities where people can thrive. Our targets are for customer satisfaction until at least 90% of survey respondents recommending Gorham homes to their friends, £30,000 of social value to be generated per completed home, and that includes local job creation and skills training, as we've already helped train 250 people through our One Localese Skills Academy, which is a picture you can see there on the right. And lastly, all new projects will meet at least 10 out of 12 categories, in the Building for a Healthy Life assessment.
Thank you. So the risk management section for this objective is that we work closely with our joint venture partners to ensure we are building to the high standards that we demand. We monitor progress regularly by visiting the projects and inspecting the work as it goes forward. The requirements to deliver social value outcomes and high placemaking standards are specified within our partner selection process. And as Christiana highlighted in the previous slide, the photograph showing the real outcomes for people is something really to be proud of at the Skills Academy. Our partnership governance structures ensure that these standards are delivered all the way through the progress of the projects. And I'm going to hand over to Chris, who will run through objective number 4.
Can we have the next slide? Thank you. Our fourth objective is to provide a commercial return to our shareholder and meet the highest standards of social and environmental accountability. Our overarching aim is to build homes at pace and to help meet Bristol's housing needs. And we'll continue to work with Bristol City Council to balance profits with our commitment to build a high proportion of affordable homes. Our procurement status, being outside of public procurement rules, means that we can secure innovative deals to support this objective. As a brief overview, our developments are principally structured through joint ventures in the form of limited liability partnerships, LLPs, with home builders, and both investment and profits are shared. The partnerships will generate profit receipts for Gorham Homes once all homes are sold on a development, and the council, as the shareholder, will decide how Gorham Homes' profit is utilised. If I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. Our business plan incorporates results primarily, as said, delivered through LLPs, with a 50% shareholding by Gorham Homes. The business plan assumes that the following development LLPs will be operating in the financial year 2024 and 25. One Localese, Dovercourt Road, New Fossway Road, Hengrove Park and Baltic Wharf. In addition, we've included in the business plan a contract with the council for delivery of the bookends development at Hengrove Park. If you have the next slide, please. Thank you. The company's finances remain stable as we've set out in this business plan. Our targets for financial year 2024-25 are that a profit before tax of 1.2 million will be generated. That's our first year of profit. And our cash financing at the end of the year will be at or below £13.6 million.
Thanks, Chris. Next slide, please. So risk management in this area, the specific risks impacting commercial return are time, cost and revenue. We manage these risks by establishing the LLP to prioritise the commercial return, and we talk about them regularly with our partners. Our ability to meet our objectives are also impacted by time taken to gain planning permission, find appropriate partners and to deliver the projects on site. To limit these risks, it is critical that we continue to work closely with the Council to align objectives and work together on our joint goals. Andrew, if you would like to finish the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thank you for listening. Hopefully we've given you a good overview of our plans for the next financial year. We now welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I pass on to Councillor, just a couple of questions myself. One of the things you said was looking for 50% affordable, but the split will be between council homes and shared ownership. My understanding is that's a restriction placed on by national planning policy. You have to have the first 25% affordable, has to be first homes or similar, is that correct?
So the local plan sets out the splits for a percentage of the 50%. Not to make it too complicated in my answer, part of the affordable housing we deliver is set out by the local plan and the planning rules. The rest is to be determined by the affordable housing provider as to what they want, so the additionality. So that's kind of up to the affordable housing provider as to the splits. But what we are certain of is that there will be a mixture of rent and shared ownership in our plans going forward. The absolute detail around those splits outside of what's set out in planning policy, which is Bristol City Council's, is up to the affordable housing provider.
Okay, thank you very much. And are there any of the schemes coming forward that will have more than 50% affordable?
One Lockleys has 55% affordable. We don't have any future plans that will be at that level.
Okay, thank you. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. For decades now, it's been clear that Bristol's housing problems cannot be satisfied within Bristol itself. We're going to have to build, people in Bristol are going to have to be housed outside of Bristol's administrative area at some point. They already have been for decades. Do you see an opportunity to operate outside of Bristol's administrative area in delivering the housing that you will need to in order to help us put roofs over people's heads? Did that make any sense at all?
Yep, perfectly clear, Steve. Thank you. So I'd say absolutely we continue to talk to our local partners. Bath and North East Somerset have a housing company similar to Gorham Homes. We regularly talk to them, and we've spoken very recently to North Somerset Council. We're very, very happy to work with local authorities and support them as best as we can. There are constraints due to our procurement status as being a body not governed by public law, and maybe that's something to have a conversation about in the future about how we might work more across boundary. Within our pipeline and within One Lockleys, part of that development is actually in South Gloucestershire. So we're already doing a little bit in other areas, but you're quite right to point out we're a constrained city, so happy to work in other areas as well.
Thank you, Steve. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. In the report itself, there's a reference to a figure of £30,000 social value generated per completed home. For those of us who are not au fait with the social value portal and the metrics that go into that, what does that encompass? Because that seems quite a large figure per home.
There isn't really, unfortunately, Andrew, a very simple way of answering that. It's a very complicated metric that measures a whole range of impacts that we have across a whole different types of intervention. I think that the reassurance that we can give to councillors today is the examples of the activities that we are undertaking at One Lockleys and how we will continue to do our developments moving forward. Our interventions in providing real jobs for real people and the green gym that we're doing with the community, those type of interventions will be the types of physical activities that you'll see on other developments going forward. I'm very, very happy to go through the absolute detail of the social value calculator with anybody who wants to outside this meeting, but I probably don't want to dive in too deeply into that now.
No, that's fine, and I think, that's been helpful. Thank you.
Christine.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions. My first is, you mentioned 3,000 houses. I didn't see 3,000 on any of the charts, so I'm wondering what the timescale is for the delivery of 3,000. My second question is in relation to net biodiversity, which I didn't see in your slides. I got the environmental standards within your housing, and you were quite clear and quite proud of that. I missed your biodiversity, so I'd quite like you to give us a little bit more about that, please. And can you talk about this, when you talk about the sites that you're going for, presumably they're all council-owned land. Is there any council-owned land that you see yourself being able to build on, but currently other developers are being engaged and spoken about with it?
Thank you. So we'll take those three questions. So if I start with the last one, in terms of the council-owned land, the pipeline that you'll see in the main business plan sets out the sites that we've worked with the council on. So the council lead on establishing a pipeline for Gorham Homes. We have a narrative with them that is continuous. So we set out for our business plan our core sites that we will include in our plan. And that then goes on to the first question you asked around the 3,000. So what we do is we separate out within our plan the number of projects that was highlighted in the map, at what stage they're going to be during this business plan period. So we start off with projects that are on the delivery phase, and then we've got projects that will be in planning this business plan year, and then future sites that will be in the pipeline. So that whole quantum of the sites that we're looking at is 3,000, and then it's subdivided by those categories, and that's set out within our business plan. Christiana, do you want to make a comment on the BNG?
Yes, thanks. So we had been already targeting 10% biodiversity net gain on all of our sites, even before the policy came through at the beginning of this year. So that still remains our objective, but we even try to aim for 20% if it's possible. So we're trying to stretch that objective, and we have sites that are hitting well over 15%, even a site that hits over 30%. So it is part of our objectives to hit well over 10% net gain.
So so what you're saying is that this business plan, at the end of this business plan, you would have delivered 3,000 houses. Is that what you're saying?
No, at the end of this business plan, we will have been partway through Hengrove Park. So it doesn't deliver out every single property within the plan, because Hengrove Park could deliver out for the next 7 years. So the plan is a 1-year plan with a 5-year forward forecast. So we'll be back next year to update further plans as to how it goes forward. And we also expect there to be movements in the pipeline, as there has been each time we presented the plan.
Okay, so have you currently, as we sit here, got a year by which you're looking to deliver the 3,000 that you've said on your own presentation that you're delivering?
So when will we have delivered 3,000 homes?
Yeah, so the reason why you can't see a date for the 3,000 homes being delivered is we don't want to make it up. So we're saying that within the 5-year period of the business plan, we're delivering 1,150. And obviously next year, when we select the next sites to aim for planning for, it will move a year ahead, and that will take the number up. So we're trying not to make it up, really.
Okay, so where did the 3,000 number come from?
3,000 is the total number of homes that will be delivered across all of the sites within the plan. is, as Christiana said, what we've not done is nailed down the final phasing of all of the projects in our plan. So that affects the answer to your question about when the 3,000 will be delivered. So the 3,000 is the total number of projects within the plan, and then the final planning, which is many, many years forward into the future, is why we're not being clear about when that final 3,000th home will be built. We're very happy to go through the pipeline in very fine detail with you at any point if you'd like to.
Just to clarify then, so the sites you currently have are capable of having 3,000 houses on them built physically, is that correct? But
Correct.
at the moment you can't give us a year by which you will be able to deliver those 3,000 homes. Is that is my understanding correct?
That's correct, because it's so far off into the future.
Mark, you're next.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. I've just got several very short questions, if I may. The first is obviously pleased to see the ongoing commitment to construction skills, which is really, really important, particularly in Bristol. So I congratulate you for that, because there are some developers that aren't doing as much as they should. Objective 2, we aim for EPCA, and then further down, the various schemes give a firmer commitment to EPCA. I just want to know whether it is a firm commitment or whether there are any constraints that might stop you reaching that point, because clearly at the moment reaching EPCA is massively important. And then I think I recall from previous conversations that the risk for construction inflation is held by the LLP. Could you just clarify where the risk of construction inflation, which obviously is much greater than the RPI or the CPI at the moment? And then final question is that many of the peripheral areas of the city have struggled with things like retail space, healthcare space, and so on, because the conventional models haven't made it viable. Are you actively involved in creating that space? So when you're building homes, are you providing the community commercial space alongside that, or is that too great a risk for you to entertain? And that's the end of my list of questions.
Thanks, Mark. EPCA is a firm commitment, and the other standards that we state are additional to that, because EPCA only gets us part way, so it won't pick up things like BNG that we've already talked about and other really important things. So EPCA is firmly a target for us moving forward. Construction inflation, the structures that we have in place at the point of us forming the LLP, so at the moment that is a one-lot lease, that cost and that risk sits within the limited liability partnership. Until the point at which it's formed, we're able to intervene and manage construction inflation, but it is something that we think the model lends itself very well to managing. We work with very large organisations that are able to control the supply chain and control our cost base. It is a risk, and we highlight it within our report. But at the moment, we feel confident in being able to manage construction inflation moving forward. And I think that we've moved through probably some of the worst phase of construction inflation at the moment. And regarding the community space, we work with our colleagues in the planning service of Bristol City Council and the local plan that sets out what's needed in the area. We're very, very open to having conversations with the community about what is needed in each of the local communities when we come forward and do consultation. Because we're a council-owned company, we can be a little bit flexible on what we deliver. So we try and deliver as much as we can. We've got lots of competing priorities alongside making a profit, delivering high levels of affordable housing. Commercial space and community space is a balance within that. And those are very difficult balances for us to achieve. So we'll continue to work hard on that and recognise that and do as much as we can. But we need to have conversations with our shareholder about those priorities.
Thank you. I've got Steve, Martin, David, Jeff in that order. So, Steve.
Okay, thank you. I've got a little list, so I'll do them one at a time and just stop me when I test your patience. Okay. First one is a question that actually was raised to Jeff and myself by a resident last week that we didn't know the answer to. So, about accessibility in the homes that you're building. How many of the homes currently under development or out of that, potential 3,000, will be fully accessible.
Cristiano, I think, is going to answer, but if we don't know off the top of our heads, we might have to come back to you, because there is different standards of accessibility within that. So there are fully wheelchair accessible and lifetime homes. So we might have to come back to you with the detailed answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can come back on each project and exactly how many and what kind of units, but there is a minimum amount that's part of policy, and we're following that. So you can rest assured that we're meeting the 2% as required by policy, but then we can provide a full breakdown of each site.
Okay. I think, I hesitate to speak on behalf of this resident, but I think 2% doesn't sound like a massively impressive number. And I appreciate most of these homes won't be lived in by wheelchair users, but wheelchair users want to visit friends who live in these homes, and if they can't get through the front door, it doesn't help. Next question, though, is about the 3 sites that you've earmarked to get planning consents or planning applications in for in the next year, and slightly parochial because one of them's St Ursula's is in our ward. Just going from what I know of St Ursula's, and the other 2 may be different, but it's a complicated site. There's an awful lot going on there, and my understanding, and I may be wrong, is that you're still at a fairly early stage of figuring out what to do with all of that and how to deal with all those complexities. To get through all of that, come up with a plan, do the level of community consultation that I hope you're going to do, and get to a point of putting an application in the next 13 months does feel like quite a tall order. So can you just talk me through a little bit what level of community engagement will come into that, and how comfortable you are with setting this, with being able to achieve this goal of getting all 3 of those sites in for planning by this time next year, essentially?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, we're aiming for that. We don't know what will, come up during these surveys that you've sort of brought up as well as our stakeholder engagement sessions. So all we can do at the point of our business planning is set our aims and targets for the year, and then do our best to fulfill those. So we've already been engaging with Shine Academy and other relevant stakeholders and the ward councillors, and we'll just continue to do so as the year progresses and try to hit our objective.
It's just add to that as you know, we're not from a standing start, certainly on St Ursula's. We've been talking to yourselves as ward councillors and other groups, so it's not that we're starting from a zero base. We're going to continue and ramp up our work in the coming year, and that's the case with the other projects that we've highlighted for planning this year. So we have a staging approach where we'll actually talk to stakeholders across our entire pipeline, and then we just ramp up activity in the target year.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. I think I appreciate we're due to meet and talk about the details of St Ursula's anyway, but understanding what that consultation might look like over the next 12 months would be really helpful. And my final one is a financial one. Just looking at the table, well, screen's gone off, whichever page it's the financial balance sheet projections is on. I think at the end of the coming year, you're forecasting 80k cash in the bank, which looks relatively tight to me when you compare it with all the other years. Are you sufficiently comfortable that that's prudently modelled and there isn't a risk of that getting uncomfortably low?
We do run a very tight ship, you're correct. And it's a target number. There will be elements within the balance sheet in other areas that are hopefully fairly immaterial amounts that will move up and down, but it seemed to me a reasonable target, and it's something to aim for.
I guess my question was, is there a risk when you are running such a tight ship and compared to £30 million of investment, 80k cash in the bank isn't huge? Is there a risk that actually runs out and the council has to step in?
There is council approved funding available. I'm just trying not to draw it. So my aim is to run this ship tight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Martin?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for the information. I've got a few questions, so I'll try and sort of cover them.
You do like Steve did and just do the first 3, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, okay. So you've described how each project is meant to be half commercial and half what's called affordable, and of that, they're each structured as an LLP, as I understand it, with a major developer. So within each of those, some of it will be council housing, some of it may be social housing of another type, I assume, and some would be for first-time buyers in the non-commercial, the non-commercial half. So that council housing has to be wholly funded by the housing revenue account. So effectively, we've provided land, you've then done a deal with the developer, and then the council is paying for the part that is council housing. Is that right? So, but we could have done it directly ourselves, presumably, if the council had developed that land. But we do assist other developers to gain access to registered social landlord or government housing funds to provide other social housing. So what's the difference when you're the developer on the site?
So I think you're asking me what's the difference between, are you asking me what's the difference between you engaging with a third-party developer, or what's the difference between you delivering it yourself?
Yes, and the difference when you are the partner, not a purely commercial partner, who still might have to do a deal with a registered social landlord or the government housing sort of funds.
So when Bristol City Council set up Gorham Homes, it set us up to be an arm's length organisation delivering a mixed tenure portfolio of property across a range of sites. That's been fundamental as part of the structure of Gorham Homes moving forward, but annually as part of the business planning process we talk to the council about what is it that you'd like us to do. So we're proceeding on the basis of a mixed tenure approach, delivering open market sale and affordable housing. We speak to the council then about whether they would like to acquire the affordable housing as part of their housing delivery housing portfolio. So the council have indicated that they would like to acquire the affordable housing that's generated through planning gain and through the additionality that we dispose of into the market. And that's the process that we've established with the council. So it's up to the council as to how they wish to go forward regarding the acquiring of the affordable housing, be that through the council housing zone HRA or through an RP. So you're quite right to make that observation.
Okay, thank you. And you said on all homes there will be 30,000 of social value. That's already been raised. If there was a purely commercial developer doing the half of their development that is open market, we would not necessarily get that. So who are you providing additional support or input from your resources that would have otherwise delivered other things to get 30,000 of social value on every single house in each development?
Simply yes. So our business plan sets out a range of priorities. Delivering social value, I think we would all agree is the right thing to do. These are all trade-offs and balances to be made, so they flow through into financial return.
Okay, thanks. So, and the last one is related to planning. There's sort of two halves. One, you've said on reserved matters sites in planning, you do not, in fact, go for carbon net zero. You only go for those on the homes submitted for planning permission in the current year. So on some of them, there won't be carbon net zero. But you've also said, in terms of planning, you're not bringing forward the energy centre housing this year, although you've already carried out a competition and secured a winning design. What's delaying that coming forward?
Which project was that last?
The energy centre site in Castle Park. It's not on the current list to be delivered immediately.
So the Castle Park development, we continue to work with partners. The market, as we've spoken about, is challenging at the moment. It's a very, very technically difficult project. So we feel that it probably wasn't one that we would be able to get to a conclusion this year. We'll continue to work with partners on how we can bring that forward. So that's a timing point really regarding that one.
And the reserve matters sites are not going to deliver carbon net zero?
That's a product of us increasing the standards through the business plans that we've had for us as an organisation. So if you go back to 2019, which was probably the first there may be in plan in 2018, it doesn't mention those standards. So the early projects such as Lockleys weren't able to achieve that. So we've increased the standards of development and the environmental standards as we've developed as an organisation. But we're being honest about the fact that we can't retrospectively go back and hit those standards on every single development, and that's one Lockleys. So one Lockleys can't get up to the standards that we would expect now moving forward, but that's a product of time and as we move forward.
You have to invent a time machine, Steve, so we can sort that problem out.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to drag us back to the building at pace section of your statement. Most of the sites that you're planning to build on are owned by the council. How do you see the council actually being able to hand over those sites to actually build, and the delays that seem to be inherent about handing over them to your good selves?
We work very, very closely with our colleagues in the council, specifically Pete sat on the front row. And we had a conversation today actually about moving forward those disposals. We work really, really hard with the council to make sure that all the competing priorities that the council have got, alongside our priority to getting to site as quickly as possible, are all managed in the best way that we possibly can do. So I'd say that we work really, really effectively as two organisations under the one envelope of ownership of the council. There's more than we can do, but we are all talking really actively and working really hard to bring forward the development sites as fast as possible. So I think that we'll continue to streamline that relationship as we develop more and more sites and transfer more projects and establish embedded ways of working. We're only about to start the transfer of our second site since we've been moving forward. So that brings project challenges in terms of us being able to dust off those documents that we did a little while ago and start again. So as we're gathering pace, I'm very confident that we'll continue to work together and we'll increase the pace at which we're able to release those sites. But yeah, I'm happy to report that we're working really well together.
Jeff.
Thank you, Tony. So my first question really is a supplementary to Steve's questions about accessibility, because my understanding is that to actually design a house that's accessible, that the additional cost is very minimal compared to any attempt to retrofit afterwards. And the basics, therefore, of external door access and wide enough doors within is not a significant additional cost. So I can only say I'm shocked at the 2% figure, and I would just be asking the question of, is there any way you could contemplate improving that? That, you know, social value is excellent and I'm all for that, but actually there are other values as well, and access seems to me a fundamental one. So that's one point. But the other then is coming on to this document. Now, as a marketing document, I think it reads extremely well. Really positive story, lots of information. But as a business plan, it's not a business plan as I recognise it, because I don't really know what the assumptions are. I don't know what's been flexed and what hasn't, so I can't judge. I don't have enough information to make an opinion on it. That's not saying I know there's anything wrong with it. I don't. But I don't know what's right with it because I don't know what those assumptions are. Now, I am hoping that Craig and the holding company have seen detailed information. But as I recall, we were presented, I think it was last year, with some very detailed plans that actually showed projected completions on each site over a period of time, which would have answered part of Christine's question about when completions were going to take place. We don't have that information to look at. So I don't actually know what's anticipated to be completed when. I don't know what presumptions have been made about house prices and what the economy is going to do. The probability is that whatever assumption you've made will be wrong. That's not a reflection on those doing the plan. that's the current economic situation. But whoever reads the report and makes decisions to endorse the business plan has to know what those assumptions are in order to be able to get in proportion their assessment of the potential risks. So all I'm saying, Chair, is that I don't think this gives enough information for us to form an opinion, and I would give notice now that I would expect all members of a committee next year to receive significantly more detail than this if they are expected to make a decision on the figures for the subsequent year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Councillor Alexander, you had your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, if I could just make the point that it was very much my steer that the business plan should be something that was much more accessible for people. The detail is, of course, available to councillors whenever they want, but I think also a business plan should look attractive and should have a proportionate amount of information in it that people other than councillors and accountants would want to look at it and engage with what the company is doing. Thanks.
Steve.
Chair, can I just add, that may be the case, but it's not been offered to us. So consequently, last year I had sight of it. This year I haven't been offered the chance to have sight of it. So I'm just putting it in that context.
Okay, thank you. I think there is some information that is going to be made available, but I'll hand over to Steve as well.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy, Councillor Gollop, to offer you the opportunity to sit down and Chris and go through any of the detail you may wish to. So please reach out to Chris and he'll do vice versa and we can run through that information. I can give assurance to the room that the details have been shared with the shareholder. So we are being very, very transparent with the council and around our detailed plans. Regarding wheelchair homes, which was your first point, there are a number of percentages that are set out within the local planning documents that say the amount of what standard of homes you need to deliver is. I agree with you that there is an opportunity for us to deliver more, and we would like dialogue with the council about what that looks like. There is more cost. So if you go fully wheelchair adapted, these are larger properties with more circulation space, with specialist equipment, specialist kitchens installed, for instance, at a lower level or may go up and down. They could be very, very expensive. So we need to work collectively between us as a developer and the council to make sure that we get the right adapted properties for the right people. In my experience, the worst thing we could do is create adapted generic properties that aren't actually suitable for anybody in particular, and they don't get allocated to anybody and get changed back to general needs. That would be a disaster. So there is an opportunity for us to dive into that, and maybe after the election and next year we could look a lot closer at how we could target some of our delivery to meet those specific needs. But at the moment, Gorham Homes as a developer, we principally are developing around the standards that are set out in local planning policy. So that is our structure, because we develop out and then we dispose. But there is absolutely an opportunity for us to talk to colleagues in the council to get some bespoke housing designed in at an early stage. So very welcome to have that conversation.
Steve, did you have some more follow-up questions? Or did you... Martin, did you have some additional questions? Okay, thank you. Anybody else? In that case, thank you, Andrew, Steve, Chris. my
Christiana.
Ago. I was looking at very close. Also, thank you for Vicky sitting quietly. I will respond to your email, Vicky. I promise. I'll do it before the end of the day. Thank you very much for coming along. You're welcome to stay, but for now, we're going to move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the Bristol Waste business plan. And I believe I'm going to be handing over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, colleagues. Yes, I'm delighted to...
Andrew, just one moment. Just there is the potential for us to move into a exempt session for part of the Bristol Waste business plan if required. I would prefer as much as possible that we stay as much as we can within the public session and only move into exempt session if we have to at the end. So if we can try and focus on the non-exempt session first of all, and then if councillors do want to go into exempt session, we'll do that at the end. Sorry, Andrew, for interrupting you.
No problem, Chair. Thank you. Councillors, colleagues, I'm delighted to be here this afternoon in your council chamber to introduce the Bristol Waste Business Plan. Let me start with some introductions. My name's Andrew Pollard. I'm the Chair of Bristol Waste. 2 seats to my right is Gary Phillips, the Interim Finance Director. To my right is Dave Knight, the Interim Managing Director. And to my left is Hannah Sturman, the Director of Transformation at the company. So I suppose the last 12 months can be, well, even less, can be characterised as a period of significant change for Bristol Waste and one of transition. Dave, the new Interim Managing Director, joined in May last year and quickly set to work identifying areas of potential improvement, bringing together his senior team and starting to transform the business. I came in September, and it was really about building a new board. We appointed a new chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, Robin Pritchard, in September. Also, Robin is a very experienced internal auditor, but also sits as chair of Audit and Risk at West London Waste Authority, so brings a lot of experience to that. And then in terms of the council's own nominated director on the board, Steve Pearce retired in November 2023 and was replaced by Councillor Philippa Hume, whose seat I'm borrowing for the course of this afternoon. So thank you to her for letting me do that. Gary joined in December, and in terms of Dave's team, a couple of key appointments was Sean Trotter joining as Director of Operations in September. He has a waste background and he's very much steering the waste side of the business, whilst on the other side of the business, not to be forgotten because it's an important part of our business, which is facilities management and facilities services, James Tams joined as Deputy Operations Director in June last year. So significant new personnel and a new team going forward. Previously, we'd had a 1-year business plan. It's quite inward looking, probably necessarily so. 1-year business plans are not where anyone wants to be because there's no horizon scanning in there. And we were determined as a team this year to do something different, something much more outward-looking, something that's much more reflective of the horizon and the needs of the shareholder and the wants of the shareholder in the years to come. And so it's important when doing something like that you don't forget the basics, because getting the basics right for a service that's so visible in the public domain is really important. And in terms of this 3-year plan, sustainability is very much at the heart of it. It's certainly, in terms of my own interests, at the heart of what I do. I'm Chair of Sustainability West Midlands, and I know how important the sustainability and green agenda is for this council. So it's important that we reflect that and build that into our work and contribute to your targets. There's also significant community focus in what we do, and that's also something that we've sought to reflect in terms of our plan going forward. In delivering the plan, we work closely with council officers, and we've invested significantly in building relationships with the council over the last year. There's been a significant improvement in that, and there's been a lot of engagement with all of the council officers in developing the plan. At the same time, on the board, I've been concerned to improve governance so that management is empowered to deliver day to day, each day and every day, and board is focused on governance, oversight and strategic direction is what a board should be doing. Also holding management to account from time to time as required and providing that critical friend work that a good board should do. Above all, I'm keen to ensure that this is your company and we want to make sure that we deliver for you each and every day these frontline services. And we believe that we can do that with this plan. In fact, we're confident of being able to do that, working with you and working with senior colleagues in the officer group, so John Smith, Pete Anderson, others, in partnership. And it's that partnership that's really important to a successful council company like this. I'm now going to ask Dave to help explain to us what exactly we're going to do to enable us to deliver and how. So Dave, over to you, and I think we have a slideshow. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to pick up on some of the themes that Andrew has just introduced, but just to emphasise, this is a long-term plan, and it's a high-level strategic plan, and it is very much focused on helping the city deliver its strategic sustainability targets. Next slide, please. I think it's worth just highlighting the services we do, because I think people forget and think we're only about waste and recycling. Clearly that is the core of what we do, but we are much more than that. And you've got a list there that you can see. So we run all the recycling centres, we run reuse shops for the benefit of the community. We keep the streets clean, and that includes clearing any fly tips or graffiti. But let's not forget our facilities management side, which is a growing part of our business, where we are working with a lot of the BCC properties in terms of interior cleaning and providing security as well. And by the way, we grit the roads just to keep you safe in the winter. But equally important, we do a lot of community engagement. So we are out in the community trying to help people in terms of understanding waste management and recycling and what they can do, and what else they can do, and what the community can do in terms of litter picks and keeping their whole community clean and safe. Next slide, please. We also provide services to our commercial customers. And this is a part of the business that is growing and growing rapidly. And a lot of the plan is focused on this as well, because this is one of the benefits of being a technical business, that we can go outside to external companies and provide services to them. And that brings more money into the city. So that's a combination of waste and recycling and facilities management and some consultancy as well. And this is why some of the information particularly financial information this year, we have kept in the exempt section, because if we were to make that public, that would be a wonderful gift to all our competitors, because it would give them our cost base. And we can't do that, because if we did that, we would not win any other business. Next slide. Back at the end of last year, we published what we call our impact report. And this highlights some of the achievements that the business has delivered over the last year. And although this is the backward-looking bit of a forward-looking plan, it is important in terms of setting the context. So next slide. So I just want to pick out some. And the first ones are independent assessments. So they are done by people other than ourselves. So it's not just us saying it, it's other people. And the first one is BCC itself, which undertook a benchmarking project at the back end of last year. And two of the key results there was that Bristol Waste provides the best value for money versus comparable cities across England, so that we know that we're getting something that delivers financially. But more than that, it also highlighted that we deliver the best recycling method. So the method that is slightly higher cost, but delivers a higher return, because we actually recycle more than anybody else. So that the income we gain from that helps fund the business and the service as well. DEFRA have confirmed that we are the #1 core city for recycling rates. I think Manchester is second, but it's good that Bristol is still top of the tree there. And then for your own surveys, we have very high levels of resident customer satisfaction, both in terms of waste and street cleaning. And in fact, I'm led to believe that they are the highest levels of satisfaction within the council. So that's something we're very pleased about. Now, Bristol Waste is an out-and-out company, and it's a normal company and needs to operate in a normal way in terms of its financial controls, its governance, its structures, its policies, etc., etc. But it's much more than that. And it's the benefit of being owned by the council. So a clear focus of ours is on delivering social value as well as performing in the normal way. So last year we delivered over £30 million of social value in total. And I've just picked out just a few items here of some of the things that we do. So we recycle and refurb a lot of IT equipment, and that goes back into the community. So it's part of the council's tackling digital poverty strategy. We work with the community on community litter picks. We have volunteers in our reuse shops at all the recycling centres. And that's one of the ways that we use as a pathway back into work to help people who perhaps sometimes are struggling to get back into the workplace, and this is a great way of them to do that. 10,500 community engagement activities, so you can see that we are very, very active and high profile in the community. Lots of talks and lots of streets visited by the community engagement team. So these are things that we do that most people probably wouldn't notice, wouldn't be aware that they're happening, but they're critical to what we do. And it's a link between us, yourselves, and the community. And they are things that other organisations would not offer. Next slide. So, onto the plan. As Andrew said, we spent the last sort of best part of a year or so much more inward looking and sorting out some issues that we had to resolve, things that were not right. And strengthening the relationship with the council. From now on, it's much more outward looking, more positive, and very much focused on growth. Next slide. So core strategic elements that underpin this plan, and the first one is at the top on the right there, we deliver for our clients. We are absolutely a customer service organisation, and that is very close to our hearts. So clearly that is a large part of our focus. The other one at the top there, working in harmony with the council, you might think is obvious, and in many ways it is, but we recognise that we're very different animals and operate in different ways. But what we do have is the same common objectives. And I'm really pleased with the way we work together now. We are absolutely as one in terms of what we are trying to achieve. Our culture, we are improving all the time, and to make it a much more modern culture internally. Part of that is having open communications. Just to give you one example, I have catch-up meetings with people across the business every 2 weeks, where there is no agenda. They can just simply arrive and quiz me on anything they like. And that's an indication of what we're like now. And clearly we have to deliver financially as well. Next slide. So part of the plan involves what we call changing the narrative. And I need to explain what I mean by that. So there are 3 parts to it. And the first one is to change the way we describe ourselves or see ourselves. Because we don't see ourselves anymore as simply providing a waste service or cleaning service. It's much more than that, much bigger than that, because we are about playing our part in your plan to improve the quality of the people's lives of Bristol. What we do does have a positive impact on people's physical and mental health, and clearly has a positive impact on the environment. This change is not semantics. It's really important, because I think the business had started purely to focus on the what, but had forgotten the why we do that. And it's actually the why that drives us. And the why is the context for everything we do. As I say, it's not just semantics, it has a real change in the way we appear. For example, in recruitment, it is difficult to attract people to any job these days. There's a lot of competition. But by positioning ourselves this way, we are attracting people who are like-minded and are also motivated by these things. And that is making it easier to get the right people into the business. The second area is raising our profile in the city. So Bristol Waste is a big, important organisation, not the biggest in Bristol, but it's certainly a big one. And we need to play our part. And I don't think we always have done. So we do now, and we'll increasingly do so. So we're very much part of the one city partner approach, which is something as a new person to this area, I think is absolutely fantastic and works well. And it's tangible. So not only can we contribute, but we can also gain. So for example, at the moment, we're working on potential projects with a number of people, including Ashley Community Partnership, Babassa, Job Centre Plus, Church of England. These are things that would not have happened if it wasn't for that one city connection. Next one. And the third area is the partnership with the council. So I think in the past we have probably sat back and said, right, what's your strategy? But we're the co-experts in this, so we need to be helping you drive that strategy together. So that's one element. We also need to gain contracts from BCC, so rather than those contracts going to outside organisations where that funding leaves the public sector and leaves the city and goes to some other anonymous player, that can stay within us and we can deliver those contracts. And there is more that we can do that's currently done internally with BCC, which perhaps would better be suited with ourselves. And the benefit of that is it's to do with the TECL rules. So 20% of our turnover is allowed to be with commercial customers. So the bigger the work we do with the council, the bigger the potential that we can do for outside companies as well. Next slide. So we said that working towards carbon net zero and sustainability targets is what runs through this entire plan. There are a few things here. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but for example, street guardians. Our street cleaners in particular are in the community all day, every day, mainly on foot. So they have a significant role to play and I think a growing role going forward to keep an eye and help identify any particular issues within those communities. And just to give you one example, so just a month or so ago, one of our street cleaners saved a life by realising that someone had fallen into the water. If it wasn't for that person and the action they took, that person would not be alive. So this is important, it's tangible. Electric fleet, that is something that we would love to be totally 100% electric, and clearly that fits in with the environmental side. There is a financial premium to pay for that. You know, an electric waste cart is significantly higher than a diesel one. So that is something that we need to work with the council to see what we can do there. And then the Albert Road is our kind of one of our main sites. It's part of the development plans for Bristol, so we know we have to leave that site. That presents us all a great opportunity to build a new site that is carbon net zero, is the right size, and delivers all the services we need and can be something that we can be proud of. Next slide. Other elements of the plan. So the commercial side is where a lot of our growth will come from. And that is in part why we're here, as I say. So we have put a new structure in place there. There's a new sales team. There's marketing support there as well. So we are taking this very, very seriously, and much more seriously than we have done in the past. We are in the middle of a back office reorganisation. That is literally right now, we're in the middle of that. So we have a restructure that we have proposed and are consulting on at the moment. There are two reasons for doing that. One is that we need to make sure we've got the right people in the right structure in the right place that enables us to deliver the plan going forward, not just the plan that was in the past. So all organisations have to change all the time. And also, we had to have a structure that was affordable. So both of those are important. And the next area is what we call invest to save. And there are areas where we need to invest, particularly in new recycling campaigns. So there are some tough targets that we've got to hit going forward in terms of the amount of waste that is recycled. If we carry on doing just what we're doing now, we will not hit those. We will fall short. Therefore, we have to do different things and we have to do more. So we will test those on a kind of test and prove basis. So we will start small, low-level campaigns, assess how it works. If it does, expand it, expand it, expand it. Not only should that be good for the environment, it should be good financially as well. We're also investing in our development at Avonmouth site, and that gives us a greater level of facilities and will enable our commercial business to grow, and also gives us some resilience as backup for our Albert Road site. And then the final area to highlight is our reuse shops. So we have them at all our recycling centres. We've done well with them, but they haven't had much focus. So from now, we're going to give them full focus. They will have proper management support and proper people to lead those so that we can really grow those. And that directly impacts the people around those areas. Finance. Over to Gary.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think before we look at the 3-year summary, it's worth restating what Dave mentioned earlier about the limited amount of finance information that we put in the plan. As Dave mentioned, we are a commercial and operational business as well, and we're currently going through a number of bids and tenders which would expose ourselves to other facilities management and commercial waste businesses as well. So I'll talk around the figures that we've put in the plan at high level and also go into the cash and investment situation. So currently we are on target to meet our 2 million loss. We mentioned before, this is a loss-making business. It's in a turnaround phase. The current year has seen many different cost impacts from drivers. Wage increases have been higher than budget. We've got an aging fleet of vehicles. We're 6 years into an 8-year life, so we're seeing high costs for spare parts, maintenance. And also we are beholden to fuel costs in the market as well, which obviously hit us earlier on in the year. Another cost driver was the sale of recyclates that we do. So we collect waste and we sell it to the recyclates, and those rates have dropped dramatically. So for this year, I think we are at a point where we're looking at the 2 million loss. We're 10 months into that period, and we're comfortable that we will deliver that position. So jumping forward to 2024-25, so we're seeing a significant increase in the result. So we're moving close to 0.8 of a loss, still a loss-making organisation. But over the past few months, we've been communicating with our business partners in the BCC to have a contribution towards supplementing our municipal waste losses. And we've also got our commercial and facilities management P&Ls, which will also contribute towards that as well. So we've got 3 profit and loss streams, and the 2 profit-making ones will also supplement the loss-making municipal. In addition to that, we've got a back-office restructure, just mentioned. That will also impact savings towards reaching our business plan for next year. We're building up our procurement team, so we're operating more commercially. We're looking at going into consolidated procurement deals on high-value items. We've got a big overhead base of in excess of 40 million, so there's lots of opportunities to save. So that team is being built up. And as already mentioned, we've built up our commercial sales team and entering into those bids and tenders with many different local authorities and commercial arms to build up our P&L. So for next year, our target is to reach the 0.8 loss. Year 2, we'll see us edge a bit closer. So again, growth and development in the commercial area, and also tightening up on overheads and procurement. By year 3, that is our target to actually make the legal entity as a whole a break-even company. So we're being realistic that it won't happen in a year, and that's why we wanted to present it by way of a 3-year plan, because of the financial situation that we're in. We talked about cash earlier as well. That is one of our strengths, and due to that reserve situation with our cash, we've been able to invest a 5 million project in Avonmouth, which will see benefits long term as well. That was by way of a part loan, but a significant amount was delivered from our reserves. We're also looking towards completing our financial statements for this financial year at the end of March without any going concern issues as well, which is a statutory disclosure of which we're in a very good position. So as far as the cash situation, that is something we can rely on, but that's not to dismiss that we want to get our profitability increased over the next 3 years. So we actually are moving into a profit at the end of year 3, marginally as well. Next slide.
Okay, so just to summarise, so we have worked very closely with... Just to summarise, we have worked very closely with our council partners in terms of the funding for the services we provide. And that funding has increased, and I think you have to say that's quite a remarkable achievement, really, in an environment that is very financially challenging for the total council. So we are pleased with that. We are a business that's in transition. We've made a lot of progress, but there is still more to do, so we are not perfect. But we are better than we're giving credit for. We're one of those organisations where nobody notices our services until they go wrong. And inevitably, sometimes they go wrong. Most of the time, they are right. So it's good when no one notices in that respect. And we certainly provide value for money. We are working as one with the council, and that is a real achievement, I think, going forward. And we are very focused on improving quality of life. So the green agenda is absolutely central to everything that we're doing over the next 3 years. And as Gary said, our cash position is good. So there are no risks in terms of that business in that respect. Okay, over to you.
Thank you. Before I hand over to my fellow councillors, just a quick question, because I think this is something that I get asked, I won't say a lot, but a few times by members of the public, is you mentioned about tech hall versus non-tech hall. And I think the example you gave was if you did more business with BCC, that would allow you to then do more commercial business. And I just wanted to double check, is it just BCC business? So for instance, if hypothetically South Gloucestershire were looking for somebody to do their waste contract, if you were successful, that would that count as part of the 80% or the 20%?
Yeah, that would count as part of the 20.
Okay, so you wouldn't be able to bid for it because it'd be too big.
Yeah. No, well, it would be great to hit the ceiling of that 20%. When we do, there are ways that we can manage that, but that's not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Just briefly, Chair, on that one, the trick is to fill the hopper up of the 20% as much as possible, and then we would likely come to the council, because it's a reserved matter, and seek the creation of a non-tech or sister company to take the bigger business. That's how you do that.
I wasn't going to mention that, but I'm glad you did. There's a conversation like that being held elsewhere as well. David and then Steve.
Thank you, Chair. In last year's business plan, you focused quite a lot on the village principle. Can we have some feedback about how well that has worked and how you're going to enhance it, please?
Yeah, our feedback is that that's worked very well. It is something we're looking at expanding. So we did it for our street cleaning services, and we're looking to see what other services we can adopt the same principle going forward.
Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, thanks very much. I was struck by there's quite a bit of stuff at the start of the report there about customer satisfaction levels, and you said you're a customer service business, and the reason it struck me is because it's not the story that I hear when I talk to residents, and I get what you're saying, that people don't notice when everything works well. We only hear when it's a problem, but we've got streets in our ward at the moment that haven't had an on-time collection since early December, since the rerouting. I got an email in my inbox this morning from a resident wanting to know why your street never gets cleaned. I've been asking for over a year for a schedule of street cleaning so we can understand and explain to people, and never had it. And I get these are all operational issues, and today is about the bigger picture. But I think this does become a strategic issue, because the elephant in the room that hasn't really been mentioned in this report is that the municipal contract is up for renewal. Well, I think it doesn't finish for another couple of years, but that process needs to happen very, very soon. And it becomes a strategic issue for you if people out there don't understand how good you are, or how good you say you are. Because if I'm a councillor here after the election and I've got to sit on the committee that's making that decision, I'm going to have to go back to my ward and explain to people why I want to renew Bristol Waste and not go out and employ Biffa or somebody else. And if you've got that mismatch in what the data is telling you about the level of service and what people out there are feeling, it starts to become a strategic issue, I think. So I guess if I can try and turn that in my rambling into a question, two questions, I think. One is, what more can you do to improve the way that you communicate and explain your services to people, and use us as allies in that as well, to try and close some of that perception gap? And two, on the renewal of the contract, I think there was one mention on a long-term timeline in this report about it, but what assumption has been made in this business planning about that renewal, and how big do you believe that risk is that potentially it doesn't happen?
Okay, Dave, before you respond, Stephen, do you want to respond on one of those points?
Just to say, obviously, the renewal question is one for the shareholder, not for the company. It's a technical company. It exists to deliver a contract because we created it. So it's probably best addressed to, at the moment, the shareholder. As I said in May, that will be me. But we've noted that the fact that will be an important issue. I think Scrutiny and other session have actually referred to that. So it will be needing to be on the work programme for next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably follow up. So we're aware of that timeline. Obviously, in fact, the benchmarking that was mentioned earlier was the kind of beginning of the process for the retender. In fact, we looked at, to be blunt, we looked at the three potential options already. So a full outsource, a full insource, or continuing with the current basis, and that was fed into the benchmarking work that we've already done that confirmed that actually we're probably getting best value for money from the waste company as they are. In terms of the data around customer satisfaction, that's actually come from the council's quality of life survey, and you can plot it on the citizens' responses, and it shows that it has improved. And in fact, as Dave mentioned, it's the highest performing service that the council delivers. So, these are all positive things. I mean, I'll leave it to Dave to talk about how you could work together to improve that message or share that message with the public, if you feel that it's not in step with what the public are actually telling us through the quality of life survey.
Dave.
Okay, just to answer the last bit, this business plan takes us up to the end of the contract. In terms of how we are perceived, etc., what I've quoted to you is what other people say. So it's not what we say about ourselves, because you might think we're wonderful or terrible, it wouldn't matter. It's what the public in general says, so we can believe that to be true. Now, clearly, there are going to be instances where it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, people are not going to be happy. So we deliver, or we collect 22 million collections every year. So, and last year, our missed collection rate, for example, on waste and recycling was 0.1%. So it's very tiny, but it's out of a big number. So whenever that happens, and it's not possible to be 100% right, it just can't. Whenever that happens, someone's going to be dissatisfied. It is fair to say at the moment that we are in the middle of a rerouting exercise. Most of that has gone well, some of it not. And it is the not that you're referring to in your inbox today. Just to put that into context, and it's real, the issue is real. We put out between 43 and 45 lorries every day for recycling, and the issue is only recycling, not on waste. So that's 43, 45 every day, across 5 days a week. There are 8 routes out of all of those where we're having issues. We have done everything we possibly can to try and resolve that. We're still having issues, and therefore we need to go back and think about changing the day for those particular collections.
I think I'll just add a quick comment as well, because I had a problem of non-collection on the street I actually live in, which was slightly embarrassing. And it turned out the reason why the collection was not being able to be made was because somebody had parked their vehicle at the end of the road in an area where it made it impossible for the truck to come down the road, and they had to try and come back the next day only for the same thing to happen. And I think that kind of works on. I think if it's a repeated same roads all the time, I think that's a different concern, whereas when we can expect if it's a one-off because somebody's not parking properly. So I think there are 2 different areas there.
Yeah, there are. The parking is increasingly problematic, and I've experienced myself when I've been out with the crews, where we just could not physically get the truck down the road, no matter what we did. And the thought of knocking up residents in the hope of finding the owner of one particular car that's blocking the road at 6 o'clock in the morning probably wouldn't go down well. So you have to abandon the road. To counter that, we have increased the number of narrow vehicles that we use. So they can be a bit more manoeuvrable and get around those areas. The downside of that is, by definition, they're smaller, which means they fill up quicker, which means you have to return to base sooner, which means you lose time and potentially you lose the roads at the end of the day as a result. So it's difficult to resolve.
Yeah, my solution would be to have something on the front where you can lift the car up and move it, but I don't think I'm allowed to do that. So, Martin, you're next.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for this report. I appreciate, I could have had the previous conversation, so I'll let that lie, because I definitely have one of those routes in my ward as well, and the parking issues in my ward too. I'll focus on the green agenda and the social value, because you've played that up very much this year, and I welcome that. It's something I've been asking for most of the last decade that I've been a councillor. And the reuse operations, you said, are going to get a higher focus. So I suppose my question is that something the client, the council, has asked you to do, or is it something you are committed to doing because it's also the right thing to do? Because you've kind of implied it's a bit of both, and it needs investment to expand. It relies on volunteers, it relies on a certain amount of extra goodwill, and I welcome the outreach to community groups, to neighbourhood groups, the availability of the reuse service. I think it really is important to actually cut the problem at source rather than to clear up the sort of materials. So where does it fit in terms of your relationship with the council?
I think the answer is it's a bit of both, as you suggested. So some come direct from us, and other areas, say something like Big Tidy, might come specifically from the council. And that's the benefit of us working in harmony, which we genuinely do now on these things.
Pete?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say a bit of both. I think from an employment perspective, routes to employment, working closely with Jane Taylor and the education team, there's some really good work there that we've been talking about on the back of One City and renewed focus on social value and employment. So whether it comes in from the members of the public or from councillors to the client, we can then have that conversation with the company or vice versa. So yeah, I would say it was a bit of both.
Okay, thanks. Just to follow that slightly. So the amount of social value we get and the amount of reuse we get might be smaller if it was purely contractual, I suppose we're saying. So it could reduce if how we deliver the service changes in future with a different operator. But what we're getting relies on the success of your operation if you're putting your own kind of company sort of resources into it.
I'll answer that as someone who spent many, many years also working in the private sector, and I'll just give you an opinion, that's all, personal opinion. Absolutely, you would get less if this was done by the private sector, without any shadow of a doubt.
Okay, but anyway, my thanks to all the people who contribute to it, because I think it's really important, and it's really valued at times like these when there's sort of cost of living issues, but also much more awareness of the amount of waste that there is. I think the one hitch will be that when appliances are put out, they're sometimes missed. It seems to be something that's like doesn't always fit in the vehicle or doesn't always get recognised as part of the normal weekly service, and so that's just something I would like to flag up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I've got Andrew, Christine, Mark, Jeff and Brenda. So Andrew, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. I live in one of those streets that's had a regular problem with late collections as well. It's just, and I think as councillors, it's clear that there's been a lot of work being put into the company, and I think we need to recognise that. Obviously, as councillors, we do see the stuff that goes wrong, and we get reports of the stuff that goes wrong. But I think recognise there's been a lot done to try and improve the way the company operates over the past year. I had a comment and then a sort of comment/question, and the comment was, notwithstanding that there's been a lot of work, I wasn't convinced by the papers that the indication that you're sort of somewhere between that fit for the future band in the chart that's on page 108 of the big bundle, and the growth bit of the pyramid, I wasn't convinced by the self-assessment that you're sort of moving up towards that growth phase based on the rest of the paper. So that's a sort of comment. The question I had comes back to something that Councillor Smith raised with regards to, obviously the BTC contract is going to have to be reviewed, and that's a matter for the shareholder. But it strikes me, looking at that chart of the longer term timings, that you've got a decision to make with regards to procurement of new vehicles, and those two things obviously clash, and you know, so I don't know what the relative deadlines are for making those two decisions, so that things can be tied up in such a way that, you know, one party or other isn't compromising the other one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can obviously, just to confirm, you're quite right. And obviously we don't have, for example, the capital allocated for an all-electric fleet. So that would be a decision about where to prioritise from elsewhere in the capital programme. It's going to have to be made very quickly, within the first year, I'd have thought, of the new administration. Lead times on fleet are probably, 18 months? Yeah, so the two things do combine, and we don't have much time. But it's, I think, entirely appropriate that that is a decision for a new administration. It's, as Councillor Cheney said, we haven't stood still. We have started that benchmarking work. We did an awful lot to get to this point, to get to a budget which, as you can see, it's a loss-making budget, but it's maintaining levels of service where they are against a fiercely, brutally inflationary environment. You know, the wages, the recyclate market, as we've heard. So we've kind of stayed as we are because we know this is the most visible service there is. And we've produced a plan that gets us not just 1 year, but 3 years of certainty with ambitious and stretching targets around commercial business, which is, of course, what you get with the tackle, that benefit. But next year is a key year for us as the shareholder, us as the client, us as the council, yeah.
Just a quick question from me before I go to Christine, is you mentioned earlier on about the additional cost of electric vehicles versus existing diesel one. My question isn't so much about that because I've seen some of the costs, but there wasn't a time long ago where there weren't electric versions of all the different types of equipment used. Is that still the case, or are they now moved on?
No, they do exist now, but they are, because they're newer, the demand is less at the moment for them, and therefore the price is higher.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Christine.
So I've got a question about the non-Bristol City Council income. I'm interested to understand how well supported you are by some of the other huge institutions in our city, particularly those that are building huge amounts of student flats, and whether your services are something that they're picking up that end, because I think that's something we can take up with those institutions. If that isn't something that's feeding through, that'd be something I'd be really interested to understand. That's my first question. My second question is about your social value. You said it's 30 million. Did I see that correctly? So it's almost 50% of your entire income for this year. Is that right?
No, it's a separate measurement. So our income is what comes from yourselves and the commercial customers. Social value is a way of measuring.
Yeah. No, I understand that. But you've put a financial value on it of 30 million. So it's, I don't know, 48% or something.
Yeah,
right?
in that respect, yeah.
So is your matrix the same as their matrix? Because if you're getting nearly 50% social value, then that's something that I'd like to understand why our other Bristol City Council companies might not be getting that same in terms of the percentage, just as the comment. And are you using the same metrics, that kind of thing? What's the difference? And the third one is in relation to the satisfaction. At the strategic level, are you aware, year on year, where the 25% or whatever it is of those that aren't saying they're satisfied, where those people live? Because I'd be interested to understand where demographically in the city that satisfaction level might be lower, and if there's patterns to that over the time. Thanks.
In terms of the first one, to other institutions who service the city, work with us, we're at the beginning of that journey. So as at the moment in time, no, but where they put things out to tender, they would be public tenders and we would bid for those works. So we won't just automatically be given it necessarily. But part of our objective of being much more central to the city partnership is to get closer to those organisations, people like the NHS, for example. The second one, in terms of social value, I don't know whether we operate the same way. Probably there's a standard way of doing it, of measuring these things. What I would say is that we are completely different organisations doing different things, so it is hard to compare. Yeah.
So just on the social value side of things for us, a lot of it comes from where we employ our workforce from. So we have about 800 staff across the city. And a lot of our social value comes from who we're employing and how we're supporting people into employment. The other piece that we use is the kind of local supply chain. And that, again, is where we create quite a lot of social value. So we try to purchase all of our materials from local companies and keep the money within Bristol. So those are the two kind of key areas for us. But we have a very different staff demographic in terms of numbers than other companies would. So that's kind of the key difference for us, I think. And in terms of, you talked about students, and I just wanted to raise that because I know where your frustrations may be coming from in terms of the types of waste and the amounts of waste that can come out of student accommodations. And I know that the client is doing a lot of work at the moment and how we can change the way that we work with them and that we charge for those services. And so that work's happening at the moment, and we'll respond to that at the right time.
I mean, on the point about social value, there's something like a national thing, the social value toolkit. You effectively plug in various details and it returns you a financial measure. And that's what both organisations will use and the council uses for things it does too to deliver social value. And what we use in our whole tendering process that Steve Clark and myself worked on early.
Steve, do you want to...
So we use the BCC TOMS, the social value metrics, but we have a slight variance, and we have some ones that are called real estate ones, which are specific to the type of work that we do. So we based ours around BCCs with a slight variation to the ones that are specific to our industry.
I'm just interested, Chair, for us to follow up on that, because I think then we need to understand why it is that there might be huge differences, and the idea that we've got one company that clearly is engaging with the areas of the city that we know need that engagement and need that employment pipelines. We need to see that coming from all of the companies that we're overseeing. Thanks. And procurement, did you say? Or supply chains or something like that? So those would be other areas that I would be expecting to see all of the Bristol City Council-owned companies ensuring that they're engaging with.
Yeah, I mean, I think as was said, there are big differences between the type of companies. The only thing I would mention is if we do to get 3,000 homes delivered and there's £30,000 social value for each of those homes, that's £90 million of social value. So it is a sizable chunk.
I'm not disputing that, but I'm talking about percentages.
Yeah.
We spend £60 million a year.
Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the difficult job that BWC does. You know, we see it ourselves in our streets, the parking problems and so on. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. The first is just to follow the issue around social value. I was kind of interested if there's a percentage of the business spend that goes into the local economy, because it's really important, you know, whether that's at the social enterprise level or the larger institutions, it's retaining as many pounds that BWC spends in the local economy as possible. That's point one. Point two is I've got a general interest in curbside electrical collection, which doesn't seem to happen very well in Bristol, and given the scarcity of some of the material that would be collected, whether there are some further plans. I know the government has announced some intentions on this. Third question is safety and EDI reporting to board level, how that happens, how frequently that happens, because obviously these are massive priorities for the business. And the last question, which is probably more operational, has the new baler gone into Avonmouth and is it working at full capacity? and that's to be done.
Thanks, Mark. I'll give David a moment to get his notes together. And Andrew.
Shall I pick the board one up and then allow my colleagues to pick up the other ones, the operational ones? Councillor Bradshaw, absolutely, health and safety is top of the agenda, has to be for a business like this, and you know, we're very conscious of that. So it's on our agenda each time, but more than that, we have a system where we, as a board, look to deep dive particular subject matter areas that are of interest, particular interest. And where we deep dive, we typically deep dive once a year and spend some time with the executive and the team on that area. Health and safety is the only one where we do it twice a year. It's really important that we do that. And the other area, of course, is the control that comes through ARAC, the Audit and Risk Committee, where we cut across and look at the risk register on the company, and in particular health and safety is quite highlighted there. It needs to be. So our priority as a board is ensuring that risk is identified but actually well controlled. Part of the identification process has to be for board members to frankly get their hands dirty and go out on rounds, go and see the sites. We hold our board meetings on different sites each time, so we do a rotation between sites. That's partly for us to see what's going on and how it looks and how it is and get the feel for it. It's also partly for the workforce to note that we're looking, we're involved, we're engaged. So having an engaged board, an engaged management team, an engaged risk committee and processes that identify this, that's all part of the strategy that helps us consider whether we're managing these things, including health and safety, correctly.
So I'll just pick up on two of your questions, Councillor Bradshaw, around social value and then the we. So in terms of social value, in terms of percentage of spend, I'd have to come back on that. But just to provide some reassurance, we do have a new procurement team incoming, and the key priority is to make sure that all of our procurement is done in the local area. For example, we've recently done an audit of our FM procurement, and the majority of our FM materials are now brought through our local companies. So I'm broadly comfortable and confident that we are meeting those objectives, but happy to provide more information as soon as able. In terms of how our crews collect, we have some really, really great crews out there that do a fantastic job day in, day out. We do know that there are some myths that we need to bust with some of our crews about how we do, what we collect and how we do it, and that's a key part of our kind of continuous improvement programme that we continue to work with. And as you mentioned earlier, we've got a new Deputy Director, Sean, who's with us now. Between him and the management team, they're really passionate about making sure we get the basics right. So I've got real confidence that as we go into the next year, we'll start to see some significant changes in the way that we collect. Did you want to answer on Avonmouth?
Yeah, quite a specific question on Avonmouth about a bailier. That will be arriving probably September, October time this year.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Jeff, you're next.
Thank you, Tony. A couple of comments first. The one on social value. I think we need to be very much aware that it depends totally on the nature of the business. So where we have one that's very labour intensive and very locally based, I would hope we have a very high percentage social value. Whereas if we have one that has a lot of materials that have to be brought in from elsewhere, I would expect it to be different. So
I just comment on that. I think it would be useful if we can get an understanding of what opportunities are available depending on the type of businesses. Yeah. And it's not just about the arm's length companies, because this should be right across the council.
Absolutely, absolutely. But moving on, the other comment I wanted to make really was add to Hannah's comment about the crews, because I think that seeing the incredible level, the work rate that goes on nowadays, they have a very hard job, and they do it very well and very enthusiastically. And I'd be very positive, be slightly less positive following the rerouting about the crew that broke our green box, but that's a different matter. The general principle is there. So I always would implore residents, however frustrated they are when their bins aren't collected, it's not the crews they should be directing their complaints to. It's preferably not their councillors either, but they should nevertheless be directing their comments somewhere else. I think, Dave, I'm not going to say anything you don't know my views on already, because we've had various discussions. But the first point is the difference between the client's needs and the customer's needs, and they're not always the same. And I say that in the context that to look at missed collections, you look at if they're collected ultimately within 2 days of when they should have been collected. But if I try and explain that to a resident, they don't understand that measure at all, because it's not collected the day that they're expecting it to be collected. And that is a very different measure. Now, I think you talked about rerouting, and I think the biggest lesson is how someone captures the information that is stored by people who have done that route for a period of time. Because the number of missed collections that we've come across, because they're in a quirky place and not part of the standard flow of the road, and it is taking sometimes many weeks to actually get that registered, and it's causing enormous frustration to people who are there with their bins full and no way of getting rid of them. Now, Chair, but the final question is one that I know can't be answered in public session, but the question I'd be asking both the waste company and the client or council officers is what is the perceived view of the correct rate for the contract that is being undertaken? And I ask that because whilst I expect the council to get value for money, I expect it also to be paying a full rate for the job. And I say that in the context of the original contract that resulted in Bristol Waste being established was because the council had, by one means or another, established a contract way below the fair value that the contractor needed to deliver. And that actually made the contract unserviceable. So it's actually really important that in this process, we are looking at paying Bristol Waste the right amount for what we're expecting. If in fact it's going to cost more if we went out to an independent contractor to get the service that we need, I would question why are we not paying that higher amount to Bristol Waste. And you do know I don't like paying higher amounts to anybody, but I think we have to be realistic, and therefore from a scrutiny perspective, I want to know that somewhere in the organisation we're asking those questions. I don't even necessarily need to be privy to all the detailed answers to those questions, but I need to know that they've been asked and that we are checking that we are actually getting something that is commercially achievable. Because the point in this situation is that every pound Bristol Waste loses, the City Council ultimately ends up being responsible for. So it's not in our interest to negotiate a price that is below what we ought to be paying, because otherwise we end up with very dissatisfied residents. And Craig mentioned the residents, sort of the surveys that go on. But if you look to the time when that previous contract was negotiated, that was an interesting time when a Lib Dem administration ended up becoming incredibly unpopular because they actually changed the contractor, and it happened to coincide with the satisfaction surveys being carried out, and it achieved a very, very low result, and that marked a downward trend for that particular administration. So it is important because it affects every resident in the city.
As Jeff, I do accept that. I don't think that is a question that we can answer in this session. But
I'm not expecting it to be, and I don't even expect it to be answered in a confidential session. But I do want to know those questions are being asked, and that is being analysed by officers and the company to make sure that it's got right.
So I think both Stephen and Craig may want
So, I mean,
to.
I don't think you need to refer to any exempt or commercially sensitive information, because it's actually on page 12 of the business plan very clear that there is still a deficit in future years, but it's a deficit that's manageable. We understand exactly where the reserves position is, and there is a board of directors of the company who wouldn't sign up to something which they thought presented a going concern issue. You'll see in there that there's a £4 million contribution from Bristol City Council to allow the company to basically maintain a current standard of service. It's fantastic news that despite everything that we are dealing with, we've been able to do what I think the administration was hoping to achieve, which is to keep the service the way it is, recognising the quality of life survey data is good, relatively speaking. There's always quibbles, operational problems, we know that, but Bristol Waste, we feel, and having benchmarked it, we can now say with quite a lot of certainty, delivers good value for money. What we've done is we put more money based on the draft budget, £4 million. That is delivering, as you can see, a slight deficit, 800, I think, next year, compared to over 2 million this year. And that happens against a picture where there is a sufficient reserve in the company for it not to create a going concern issue. And that's despite, a very challenging pay round and recycling markets going the wrong way. So, I think what we're saying is there is stretch that we want to see by way of more efficiencies. There's more opportunities in the commercial space, and the commercial business is clearly there to provide an offset to the council. So we're not running blind here. This business plan has been produced hand in glove with the client. It's a tackle business. You are allowed to do that. You can look at it through the lens of being a department of the council. It's what we've done. Therefore, it's been asked to take some of the pain in the form of having a slight deficit using its reserves. But the council has proposed, the administration has proposed in draft budget, that £4 million additional, which allows the company to continue to offer the same level of service. So it's a very rounded picture, and it's been produced very much by both sides working together.
Well, I mean, Stephen said everything I was going to say, in particular the point around the ability to offset some of that with commercial income, which we wouldn't have were we running this internally, or had we fully outsourced it to another provider. That allows us to offset some of these increasing costs as they come, assuming that we can hit our commercial targets.
Jeff, did you have any fun? Have you completed?
Only really, I understand what Stephen says. From my point of view, the way I look at it, the company could be making a loss for any number of reasons. One of them could be because the council wasn't paying the going rate that it would have to pay an outside contractor to provide the service. The other could be that the company wasn't being managed very well. I'm not suggesting it's either of those, but I'm saying that's just two examples of where it could be. And all I'd want to know is that there is an independent benchmarking exercise going on between client and company to identify what the relevant market rate ought to be. I don't know that, and I wouldn't know whether it was right or wrong if anyone told me. But somehow we have to be looking at it. Otherwise, if the council is underpaying what is needed to deliver in the market, ultimately that will cost us, and we don't. I don't have any need to see a change in the service provision. I just want to know that we're paying a fair rate and a right rate for the service that we expect.
So Jeff, the benchmark we mentioned earlier was exactly that, really. It's quite hard because councils operate many different ways of delivering waste services. Some have in-source, some have outsourced, some have tackle companies, some have their own standalone companies. But if there are systems, so the CFO Insights, for example, which is a system that we use here, which gives a kind of breakdown of what other councils are paying, and you can benchmark against that, as an individual person or a dwelling or however you want to do it. So that bit of work has been done already and will continue to be done as it informs our next,
and the benefit,
the retender and so on.
Yeah, and the benefit is it's open book. We know what we're putting in the top of the machine, and we know what comes out the bottom. We can challenge some of the business processes and the efficiency, and we have done, and we will continue to do so. And Dave has plans in place, not all of which are baked into the numbers that you see, because some of them have got stretch, and that's as right and proper. So just to reassure you, there's no sense in which we're just hoping to buy some outcomes without paying a fair rate. By the same token, Bristol Waste, as a technical company, has to be exposed to a little bit of the pressure and pain that the whole council is facing. And I think this business plan, we feel, strikes the balance.
No, thank you, Craig and Stephen. By putting both sides like that, you certainly reassured me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Brenda.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Southmead, which has its challenges with recycling and so on in the past. But we actually did a litter pick on Saturday and got about 8 or 9 bags, which we've left hopefully for you to collect. But my comment was about why has a charge, and I don't know when this happened, but a charge been introduced for replacement blue bags, because it's a little bit difficult for us to say you should do your recycling, and people on a very low income say, well, why should I, basically. But so it would be useful to know about that. And something else, I'd really appreciate the centre at Avonmouth for recycling items. I think that's a great idea. But when I last asked, I wanted to recycle a couple of printers, and they said they couldn't do that. So at the moment, I'm hanging on to them, but they're going to have to go in the bin at some point. So I just wondered if you had any comment on that.
I mean, I'll probably comment on the blue bag. I mean, we voted that through in full council, Brenda. That was well, all of us did here in this room. Yeah, that was a savings proposal. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the income was required to offset the various budget pressures that the council and the company had.
Difficult if you've got people on low incomes. They're less likely to do that recycling now.
Hannah, do one of you want to come in on that?
I think in terms of printers and looking at other materials that we can recycle, that's part of what we're looking at in terms of reuse for next year. At the moment, I don't think it's something that we can recycle, but what we're looking at is how can we start to break down things like printers, etc., to be able to recycle the components. But that's something that we're working on at the moment, so watch this space on that one.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Christine, did you have another question?
Yeah, I had a question I got a bit overexcited about for some reason. So it's about the those that are reporting to you that they're not particularly satisfied with the service. Is the Bristol City Council Survey of Life the only source? If it isn't, where else do you get your source from in order to know that your customers are satisfied? And I'm interested to understand if you track it year on year. So is it coming from across the city? Are there particular areas? And does that reflect demographics?
Thanks, Councillor Townsend. So we do mainly use the Quality of Life Survey, predominantly because it does get sent out to such a large number of residents across the city. And for us to do something similar would be cost inhibitive. We do obviously have our complaints team, and that's managed through BCC in terms of what we see coming through. And so where we see a lot of our data coming from is what complaints are people making into the council that come to us. We are able to look at that in terms of crew areas, and we've recently started to look at how we can pull that information into ward-based data. So we're starting to now get a little bit more intelligent and clever with the way that we use the information that's coming in, so that we can look at it as on a ward basis to understand how we can improve and which areas the challenges are in. But that's work in progress, and it's part of the kind of improvement plans that we have in place. But broadly, we hear a lot from local councillors, and we really value the information that's provided through there. And we have areas that we see as hotspots, and they change depending on the challenges that we see coming through. But I wouldn't love to say, but the challenges we see are across the city. I'm not able to say, oh, this area here it has more problems than over here, but it tends to be day-based. So if you're on a Thursday, Friday at the moment, you'll be seeing more. We see more complaints than if you're at the beginning of the week, and that's because of the rerouting challenges that we're trying to work through at the moment. So it does change and move. But when I've looked at the data across the city, and I've looked at miscollections and I've looked at complaints, it has been broad. So it hasn't been in one area over another. But that's part of the work that we continue to do, and we're hoping to start to share that information more openly with you as well.
Martin.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, that last point was kind of where I was coming to with this question. So, with a fifth of the city serviced each working day, it is the Friday that kind of loses out, because that's catching up from Thursday, which is catching up from Wednesday, etc., etc. So the catch up runs out at the end of the week, and you said, or we were told something like there are 8 problematic routes, and I think more work needs to be done with councillors or residents groups as well, considering ways of getting the message out, how and when this is going to be tackled, to give a timescale. We do have people, like I said earlier, who got the same story, like November, December is the last time they had regular service in every week, and they're getting pretty frustrated, not surprisingly. But I know we need to divide what's relevant to this business plan scrutiny and what's relevant to the service scrutiny, and the role of the client, the role of the contractor, and other players like parking services and the police, who are coming in to try and help us get those corners cleared, but they can only do it where the corners are marked out, and they're not in lots of streets. So the parking services can't help, and the police can't often always help. But I think we need more collaboration with those who know the wards, and also have recognised certain things, like it's not possible to say everything's been missed today. You have to say the black box was missed, the green box was missed, the blue bag was mixed, the food waste, and people just are getting frustrated by that, because and then we also established that there wasn't this cumulative thing of regularly missed streets, and you've helped kind of say you can find some of that information now, so that's really helpful, because it's those regularly missed streets that are most of the recurrent problem, and the goodwill issues are most sort of valuable if we can restore those in those streets. So some of this is for scrutiny elsewhere. If it was about the normal waste service, it would come to communities, and we do have a discussion virtually every year about some aspect of that service and where it's going. And the benchmarking, just finally, I think it would be helpful for members to understand that, including incoming members, to know, if we're saying the council has checked, it's got not only a good service, but a service with a kind of high recycling method, as opposed to a much poorer recycling method, one that earns more income, one that gets more materials recycled. We need that, but we need members to understand that, and I don't think that's being generally communicated, so I would like to see that kind of noted for the future. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I don't know if there was a need to response for that, but if anybody wanted to.
It's nothing that surprises me, Councillor Fodor, and it's work that's happening between us, the client, and the wider BCC, particularly around the forms. So there are forms improvements that are in train, and we're supporting that where we can.
Okay, thank you. I haven't had any notification of further questions. I just want to check whether any of the councillors want to go into the exempt session. Okay, with that, then thank you all very much. And that brings the last public Osman for at least a decade to an end. Thank you all very much for your contributions. But just to remind councillors and some other people that we have still got work to do, because we still got the business planning workshop and the handover workshop as well. And we also have a City Leap presentation as well. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.